At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. Because, after all, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Jonny. Let's begin. The only thing worse than hauling literal garbage across the galaxy was haggling over the price of it with a man who smelled like he'd literally been gargling said garbage. Captain Valerie Cash leaned back in her corroded command chair, the synthetic leather cracking a protest under her weight. On her main screen, the smarmy face of a scrap merchant from the Ethelberg orbital station grinned, revealing teeth that had lost a long and bitter war with plaque. The station itself, a bustling ring of commerce and corruption, hung behind him, its docking arms extended like a grasping claw. "Come on, Captain," the merchant wheezed, his voice a slick of oil over gravel. "Grade C biosludge and pre-chewed polymer composites. The shipment is practically radiating disappointment. I'm doing you a favor taking it at all." "Lex, mute him," Valerie said, not taking her eyes off the screen. Her voice was a low rasp, cured by cheap whiskey and too many sleepless nights in the pilot's seat. Lex Calhoun, leaning casually against a humming console that was scarred with the memory of a misfired plasma pistol, flashed a grin that was the polar opposite of the merchant's. He was all predatory charm and unearned confidence. "But we're just getting to the good part. I thought he was about to offer us a coupon for a free nutrient paste with our next delivery. Maybe a complimentary delousing." "Mute him." With a dramatic sigh that echoed with theatrical despair, Lex tapped a control. The merchant's face continued to move, his greasy lips forming unheard insults, but blessed silence filled the cramped bridge of the Rust Hawk. "You're no fun," Lex said, slumping into his own chair, which was patched with silver duct tape. "I had him on the ropes." "You had us on the express lane to bankruptcy," Valerie grumbled, rubbing the knotted muscles in her temples. A hangover was clawing at the inside of her skull, a dull, persistent ache. "Jeannie, what's our ETA on a full cargo dump?" A small, quiet voice piped up from the navigator station, which was nestled in a corner and surrounded by a nest of repurposed wiring. "If we accept his current insulting offer, we can be clear of the orbital clamps in 20 minutes. If Lex continues negotiating, my projection suggests we will run out of oxygen first." Jeannie, all of 19, with wide, intelligent eyes and perpetually nervous hands, didn't look up from her console. Her fingers moved in a swift, economical dance, isolating frequencies and running diagnostic queries on their strained engine core. She was the ship's brain, and currently, the only part of it Valerie trusted. "See? The kid gets it," Valerie said. She unmuted the merchant with a flick of her thumb. "Fine, your price. Just take the damn trash." The merchant's glee was physically painful to watch, his eyes crinkling in triumph. "A pleasure doing business with you, Captain. The credits have been transferred, minus my standard convenience fee, of course." The screen went blank, replaced by the ship's emblem, a stylized hawk made of gears and rust. "Convenience fee?" Lex squawked, his voice rising in indignation. "That's not a thing. He just made that up." "It is now," Valerie said, closing her eyes and wishing the hangover away. "Just get us out of here." A sudden, jarring tremor ran through the ship, a deep shudder different from its usual symphony of creaks and groans. Valerie's eyes snapped open. "Catlin, what was that?" The intercom cracked to life with a screech of failing hardware and raw frustration. "Don't you, Gatlin, what was that me? Space-time just tore open like cheap fabric. We've got massive energy signatures dropping out of FTL portside." Jeannie was already working, her expression a mask of intense focus. "Multiple contacts, dozens, not broadcasting any transponders I recognize. Wait." Her face went pale, a sudden loss of color that made her freckles stand out. "Oh no, Captain. Their energy profiles. Their hegemony." Valerie was bolt upright, the hangover forgotten, replaced by a cold dread that settled deep in her bones. Get a visual. The main screen flickered, showing the serene curve of Ethelberg below them, a vibrant green and blue marble teeming with 20 million souls, a jewel of the outer colonies. Then, the view was filled with ships. They were long, elegant, and menacing, shaped like blades forged from polished obsidian. They moved with an unnatural grace that screamed of ancient technology and absolute superiority. At their head was a behemoth whose hull was a hole in the starfield, a patch of absolute blackness that drank the surrounding starlight. "Hail them," Valerie commanded, her voice tight. "No response," Lex said, his usual swagger gone, replaced by a stark watchfulness. "They're not talking. They're deploying," Jeannie whispered, her voice trembling. "Weapon ports are opening." "On who?" Lex asked. "The orbital defense grid is a joke. It's for chasing off pirates, not—" He never finished. Lances of pure, blinding energy erupted from the hegemony fleet. They didn't target the tiny defense platforms, which were obliterated in the first volley, their fiery deaths silent in the vacuum. They targeted the planet. The beams struck the surface, and continents lit up like flashbulbs. Cities, forests, oceans. All of it began to vaporize under a silent, systematic annihilation. They're glassing it," Valerie breathed. This was not a battle. It was an extermination. The hegemony were so consumed by their perfect brutalist art that the single pathetic junker on the system's fringe was beneath their notice. For now. "Comms are jammed solid," Lex choked out, his knuckles white on his console. "A hard system-wide blanket. Nothing's getting in or out." "Jeannie," Valerie snapped, a cold knot of experience tightening in her gut, screaming at her to move. "That deep-range sensor you acquired, can you get it running?"
"It'll overload our primary power conduit,"
Gatlin bellowed over the comm.
"Do it,"
Valerie roared back. She grabbed the controls, her hands finding their familiar places. The ship was an extension of her own broken, stubborn body. "And start recording. Record everything." Jeannie's hands moved with desperate speed. A new set of data streams flooded her console. Raw, detailed telemetry of the hegemony fleet, the energy yields of their weapons, the dying screams of a planet's electronics as its infrastructure collapsed. One of the hegemony cruisers, having finished its assigned quadrant of destruction, turned its attention towards them. A warning light flashed on Valerie's console. Target lock. "They see us," Lex yelled. "Took them long enough," Valerie grunted. She shoved the throttle forward, and the Rust Hawk groaned in protest, its old frame shuddering under the strain. She threw the ship into a spiraling dive toward the planet, using the expanding cloud of superheated atmosphere as cover. Energy bolts sliced through the space they had occupied a second before.
"The jump drive needs another 90 seconds to cycle,"
Gatlin screamed. "We don't have 90 seconds," Valerie banked hard, weaving through the blossoming fireballs that had once been orbital stations. She was flying on pure instinct, a dance she'd learned in a war she'd been thrown out of. "Jeannie, give me a blind jump calculation, anywhere but here."
"A blind jump could tear us apart,"
Jeannie cried out.
"Getting shot will tear us apart faster. Do it."
The hegemony cruiser pursued, its movements fluid and lethally exact. Valerie's were sloppy, chaotic, and utterly unpredictable. She was a bar fighter against a fencing master, and right now, that was her only advantage.
"Calculation loaded,"
Jeannie yelled.
"It's not stable."
"Good enough." Valerie slammed her palm down on the jump activation panel. The universe outside the viewport twisted into an insane vortex of color and light. The Rust Hawk felt like it was being squeezed through a keyhole. For a terrifying second, Valerie saw the surface of Ethelberg, no longer green and blue, but a uniform, glowing, white-hot. Then, it was gone. The Rust Hawk fell out of hyperspace with the grace of a brick dropped from a skyscraper. It tumbled end over end, alarms shrieking a chorus of mechanical agony. Red lights flashed across the bridge. painting everything in the color of blood. "Report!" Valerie barked, her knuckles white on the controls as she fought to stabilize them.
The jump drive is a molten slag heap,
Gatlin howled through the intercom.
The inertial dampeners are offline. The port thruster is venting plasma, and my coffee maker is officially on the fritz. I told you a blind jump was a stupid idea.
"Are we alive, Gatlin?" Valerie asked, her teeth clenched. There was a pause, filled with the sound of furious hammering.
Technically.
"Then it was a good idea," Valerie said, finally wrestling the ship into a stable, if wounded, drift. She leaned back, the adrenaline leaving her body in a nauseating rush. The silence on the bridge was heavier than a collapsed star. Lex stared at the empty space on the view screen where a planet used to be. His face was ashen, his usual smirk wiped clean away. They just erased them. 20 million people. For what? Because they built a colony on the wrong patch of dirt? No one answered. There was no answer. Jeannie was hunched over her console, her shoulders shaking. "I got it all," she whispered. "The visuals, the hegemony energy signatures, the final transmissions from the surface." She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. "I have their last words, Captain." Valerie felt something cold and hard settle in her gut. She had seen war. She had seen death. This was murder on an industrial scale, carried out with a cold, systematic focus that suggested the balancing of a ledger more than an act of war. "Play it," she said. Her voice was flat. Jeannie hesitated, then tapped a command. The main screen lit up. It was raw footage, shaking and distorted from their violent escape. It showed the hegemony fleet in its terrible glory, the lances of light striking home. The audio was a cacophony of panicked comms chatter from Ethelberg, a planetary governor pleading for a reason, a defense force pilot screaming defiance as his ship was atomized, a civilian broadcast, a woman's voice, trying to sing a lullaby to a crying child as the world burned around them. The lullaby cut off into static. Lex turned away, looking sick. Gatlin, swearing over the comm, had stopped. Even the ship itself seemed to be holding its breath. Valerie stared at the screen, at the ghost of a planet turning to glass. She felt the coldness in her gut coalesce into something sharp, something hateful. This was not an act of war. It was a statement. The hegemony were showing the galaxy what happened to upstart species who didn't know their place. "The data packet is secure," Jeannie said, her voice barely audible. "It's worth a fortune. The Terran Navy, the corporate states, they'll pay anything for this. Proof of a casus belli." Lex seized on the idea, a drowning man grabbing for a piece of wreckage. "She's right. We can sell it. Name our price. We could buy our own moon with this." He was trying to put the horror back into a box he understood. Commerce. Valerie looked at Jeannie's tear-streaked face. She looked at Lex's desperate attempt at normalcy. She looked at the recording of a dead world. The rules of her life. Survive, get paid, keep flying. Felt pathetic and small. The cynical, burnt-out captain who just wanted to be left alone was gone, burned away in the fire of Ethelberg. "We're not selling it," she said. The words tasted like iron. Lex stared at her. "What? Valerie, are you crazy? This is our one big score." "We're giving it away," she clarified, her eyes fixed on the screen. "To everyone." She turned to her navigator. "Jeannie, can you break through standard galactic broadcast regulations?" Jeannie wiped her eyes, a flicker of her usual brilliance returning. "Break them? Captain, I can shred them.
I'm not going to try to break into their networks. That would take time. I'm going to use the hegemony jamming frequency itself as a carrier wave. They're so arrogant. They blanketed the whole sector with a single, powerful signal. I'm just going to change what that signal is carrying.
Valerie stared at the kid, a flicker of awe cutting through her grim resolve. Do it. Raw feed, unedited. No commentary. She paused. Just give it a title.
What title?
Jeannie asked. Valerie's gaze was unflinching. For Ethelberg. The scream went viral at the speed of light. On the bridge of the Terran Navy flagship Courageous, Admiral Kaido Ishida, a man whose face was a study in calculated calm, watched a young woman sing a lullaby as her world ended. The composure cracked. He turned to his aide, his voice dangerously quiet. Recall every fleet, every ship. Now. In a lawless asteroid belt known only as the Scab, a pirate king called One-Eyed Kale watched the footage on a flickering projector in his throne room, which was really just a bar that smelled of stale beer and violence. He saw the elegant hegemony ships, the methodical destruction. He slammed a massive cybernetic fist onto his metal table, denting it.
Those aristocratic bastards!
He roared to the assembled captains.
Get the fleet!
In a sterile boardroom on Ethelgard, the corporate capital of the powerful Spiro conglomerate, a dozen executives in tailored suits were discussing fourth-quarter profit margins. The meeting was interrupted when the feed appeared on their 100-foot holoscreen. The chatter died. They weren't seeing a tragedy. They were seeing the liquidation of a potential market of 20 million consumers. The CEO, a woman with ice in her veins, tapped her desk. Shift all research and development funds to military production, effective immediately.
And get me a price on a new battleship fleet.
A grizzled miner named Sal aboard his rig, the Dust Devil in the Kuiper Belt, watched the video on a handheld tablet, his face, etched with decades of hard vacuum work, hardened into a mask of granite. He looked at the massive kinetic accelerator he used to crack asteroids in half. He looked back at the tablet, at the faces of people who looked just like his cousins who'd moved to Ethelberg last year seeking their fortune. He turned to his crew. Well, boys, he said, his voice a low growl. Let's go mount the big gun on the ship. On the bridge of the Starlight Drifter, a luxury cruise liner known for its zero-G casinos and Martian synth wines, Captain Eva Solderin watched the feed. Her professional smile, practiced for decades, vanished. On her console was a framed photo of her daughter, grinning, her arm around a young man. The photo had been taken on Ethelberg just 3 weeks ago. She keyed the ship-wide comm, her voice shaking with a rage that terrified her crew.
This is your captain. Our cruise is concluded. All non-essential personnel will be offloaded at the nearest starbase. All engines full power. We have a new destination.
Governments issued statements. They condemned the hegemony. They spoke of sanctions, of diplomatic recourse, of measured responses through the Galactic Assembly. They were too slow. They were using a vocabulary that no longer applied. Humanity wasn't listening to its governments. It was listening to the static where a lullaby used to be. The hegemony had expected a formal declaration of war from a single, organized entity. They had planned for a war of strategy, of fleets meeting in glorious, honorable combat. What they got instead was a species-wide bar fight, a billion personal vendettas, a chaotic, furious, uncoordinated roar of rage from every corner of human space. Humanity was coming. All of it. I should have known it was you, Cash. The voice on the main screen was crisp, formal, and utterly devoid of warmth. Admiral Madsen looked exactly as Valerie remembered. Sharp blue eyes, a jaw that could cut steel, and a Terran Navy uniform so perfectly starched it looked like it could stand up on its own. Admiral, Valerie said, her tone equally chilly.
To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you track me down to give me another medal for disobeying orders?
The Rust Hawk was currently caught in the tractor beam of the Navy cruiser Indomitable. They'd been trying to lay low in a nebula that smelled of ionized helium and stale regret, but the Navy had found them anyway. Madsen ignored her sarcasm. We tracked the origin of the Ethelberg broadcast. It had your particular brand of chaotic, regulation-ignoring stench all over it. A flicker of old respect crossed his face, quickly suppressed. You look like hell.
Running for your life tends to mess with your beauty sleep, she shot back. Are you here to arrest us for illegal broadcasting or just to confiscate my ship?
Neither, Madsen said, and the shift in his tone sent a shiver down Valerie's spine. The formal military mask dropped, revealing a man who looked tired and grim. I'm here to conscript you. Lex made a choking sound from his console. Conscript? Us? Sir, with all due respect, we're a garbage cow. Our primary weapon is a faulty refuse incinerator. Your ship broadcasts the single most effective call to arms in human history, Madsen stated flatly. That makes you the most important garbage scow in the galaxy. He focused back on Valerie. I was the one who signed your discharge papers, Cash. Do you remember why?
Vividly, she said, her voice tight. Failure to follow a direct order. Endangering a military asset to conduct an unauthorized civilian rescue. Conduct unbecoming an officer.
I cashiered you for refusing to let a colony's command staff burn while you saved a school bus full of kids. Madsen corrected her, his voice low. I told you that in war, you have to follow the rule book, even when it feels wrong. He leaned closer to the camera. Well, Captain, the rulebook just got spaced. The hegemony wanted to make a point, and we're about to make a counterpoint with the business end of every ship we can find. I don't need officers who follow the rules. I need people who know how to fight when there are no rules. You're back in. Valerie stared at him, speechless. The single act that had ruined her career, the black mark on her soul, was now her ticket to the apocalypse. The irony was so thick she could taste it.
We're not soldiers, she finally managed to say.
You are now, Madsen said. Provisional commission, rank of commander. Your crew, your ship, are now attached to the 3rd Fleet. We'll send you the data packet with the rendezvous coordinates, and we're sending over a tech team to install some upgrades. Gatlin's voice exploded over the comm. Upgrades? If any of your spit-and-polished Navy grease monkeys touch my engine core, I will turn them into a new form of biosludge. A few hours later, Gatlin was making good on his threat, verbally, at least. 2 Navy technicians in clean gray jumpsuits were carefully mounting weapon pods to the Rust Hawk's hull, while Gatlin circled them like a furious, grease-stained wolf. Careful with that plasma conduit, he snarled. It's got character. You tighten that bolt another 1/10 of a degree and you'll throw the whole system out of alignment. One of the techs, a young woman with a patient smile, pointed to the last pod being mag-clamped to the hull.
This is the last one, Chief. Experimental short-range torpedo. Self-contained power source, magnetic launch. Simple.
Gatlin stared at the device. It was a dull metal cylinder, crudely welded in places. Simple? This isn't a weapon. It's a suicide switch in a tin can with a light fuse and run instruction manual written by an idiot. He tapped the casing. It rang with a dull thud. One good hit to that casing and we'll be a rapidly expanding cloud of radioactive vapor.
Orders are orders, Chief,
the tech said, packing up her tools.
Admiral Madsen's compliments. He said you'd appreciate its robust design.
Robust, Gatlin muttered, glaring at the torpedo as if it had personally insulted his mother. That's one word for it. Back on the bridge, Valerie listened to the exchange with a grim smile. Madsen knew exactly how to push Gatlin's buttons. He also knew that Gatlin would spend the next week meticulously studying the stupid torpedo until he knew how to make it work, or how to turn it into a surprisingly effective coffee brewer. The final count came in with the rendezvous coordinates. Over 700,000 ships converging. The number hung in the air, vast and terrifying. They hadn't just lit a candle. They had thrown a match into a munitions depot the size of a solar system. The rally point was less a military formation and more a cosmic traffic jam. When the Rust Hawk dropped out of FTL, the sight that greeted them stole the breath from their lungs. It was a swarm, a sea of ships stretching for thousands upon thousands of kilometers in every direction, glittering in the light of a distant star. There were sleek, gray Terran Navy dreadnoughts floating beside ugly, functional asteroid miners bristling with improvised cannons. Corporate cruisers gleaming with ads for soft drinks and banking apps were parked next to pirate vessels that looked like they'd been bolted together from scrap and pure malice. One pirate ship had a massive stylized skull and crossbones painted on its prow. The bones replaced with wrenches. There were transport ships, colony vessels, even a handful of massive opulent luxury liners whose captains had apparently decided to join the war effort, their observation decks now crowded with hastily mounted point defense cannons. "By all the gods I don't believe in," Lex whispered, his face pressed against the viewport. "It's beautiful," Jeannie breathed. "It's a logistical nightmare," Gatlin complained over the comm. He was still fuming about the upgrades. "The combined electromagnetic radiation from this mess is making my coffee maker go haywire. Do you know how hard it is to get a decent cup of coffee in a war zone?" The comms were an impossible wall of sound. It was the voice of a species united in fury. Pirate shanties clashed with corporate ad jingles. The solemn battle hymns from a monastery ship were drowned out by 100 different rock anthems from 100 different worlds. 1,000 arguments, jokes, threats, and prayers all blended into a single, defiant roar. Suddenly, a hegemony scout ship decloaked a few hundred kilometers off their bow. It was a small, elegant thing, and it just hung there in space, its sensors sweeping across the impossible armada. The human comms fell silent for a moment, a collective breath held. Then, a single, clear voice cut through the silence. It was an open universal channel. The hegemony commander spoke with an accent that dripped with millennia of aristocratic disdain. 700,000 pieces of garbage, the voice said, each word a perfectly enunciated insult. We had thought to wage war against a worthy opponent. It seems we were mistaken. This will be a cleansing, not a war. The scout ship's engine flared as it prepared to jump away, its message of contempt delivered. On the bridge of the Rust Hawk, Lex's eyes lit up. He leaned over his console, his fingers dancing across the input panel, hijacking the open frequency. "Oh, you did not just say that, you pointy-eared ponce." "Lex, don't," Valerie started, but it was too late. Lex had hijacked the hegemony's frequency. His voice, cheerful and utterly disrespectful, boomed across the same universal channel. "Hey, buddy," Lex chirped. "You got a little something on your face. Oh, wait, that's just the look of a guy who's about to be historically fucked." The hegemony scout vanished in a flash of light. A beat of stunned silence followed. Then, the human fleet erupted. It wasn't a cheer. It was a laugh, a massive, galaxy-shaking laugh of pure, unadulterated gallows humor. 700,000 ships laughing in the face of their own extinction. The hegemony had made their statement. Humanity had just made theirs. The plan, as Admiral Madsen had laid it out, was simple in the way that punching a mountain is simple. The human fleet would jump directly to the hegemony's primary defense fortress, a star system called Krill, and punch a hole straight through the middle of it. Strategy, Madsen had explained, was a luxury they didn't have. They had numbers and righteous fury. That would be enough. The Rust Hawk found itself at the head of an ad hoc squadron of misfits, a half-dozen massive mining haulers, a few rusty freighters, and a handful of other junkers who, like them, were too small and insignificant for the main battle lines. On Madsen's Grand Command screen, their cluster was unceremoniously labeled Vermin Squadron. Vermin Squadron? Lex repeated, a grin spreading across his face as the call sign came over the comms. I love it. We're the dirty, unloved heroes. The underdogs.
We're the cannon fodder,
Valerie corrected him dryly as the universe dissolved into the chaos of a fleet-wide jump. They emerged into hell. The Krill system was a fortress. Hundreds of hegemony warships, arranged in perfect overlapping fields of fire, waited for them. Thousands of automated defense platforms dotted the space between them. The hegemony fleet moved as a single organism, each ship a component in a beautiful, deadly symphony of destruction. The humans fought like a riot. The moment they arrived, all semblance of formation shattered. The Terran Navy engaged the hegemony warships in disciplined lines. The corporate fleets, seeing an opportunity, tried to flank them. The pirate armada just screamed, "Leroy Jenkins!" over the open comms and charged straight down the middle. Valerie shoved the Rust Hawk's throttle to the firewall. "Stay with me!" she yelled to her squadron. The hegemony targeting computers, designed to track and predict the movements of conventional warships, went haywire. Vermin Squadron's haulers came alive. Kinetic accelerators whined, then screamed. Chunks of nickel iron, some the size of battleships, were hurled across the blackness. One of the freighters, its cargo bay filled with industrial explosives, simply overrode its engine safeties and became a multi-megaton kamikaze missile. "This is Vermin Leader to Vermin Squadron," a grizzled miner's voice crackled over their channel, filled with manic glee. "Let's show these shiny bastards how we deal with pests." A roar of laughter and defiant pride answered him. They had been labeled as vermin, and they were embracing it with the kind of bloody-minded joy only humans could muster. Valerie flew the Rust Hawk like she stole it, jinking, weaving, using the expanding cloud of debris from a destroyed pirate cruiser as cover. A hegemony destroyer, a vision of deadly elegance, tried to get a lock on her. Its lasers were perfectly aimed, carving clean lines through the chaos of space. Valerie's flying was a drunken stumble, a chaotic dance that made no tactical sense. The laser bolts sliced past, missing by meters.
"The targeting systems are too good," Jeannie said, her voice a rapid-fire burst of data. "They're predicting vector changes based on optimal combat maneuvers. They can't process a pilot who actively makes suboptimal choices." "You calling my flying suboptimal?" Valerie grunted, pulling the ship into a gut-wrenching spin to avoid another volley. "I am calling your flying statistically absurd, and it's the only thing keeping us alive."
A hegemony missile locked onto them. Before Lex could even deploy countermeasures, one of the mining haulers swung its massive industrial crane arm and simply swatted the missile out of the sky like a fly.
"Thanks for the assist, Vermin 2, Valerie said.
"Anytime, leader," the miner chuckled. "Just try not to get grease on their fancy ships when you blow them up." The hegemony understood war as a structured conflict of strategy and force. What they faced was something else entirely, an infestation, and the vermin were biting back. They got cocky. That was the problem. You can only fly on the edge of a razor blade for so long before you slip. A hegemony-heavy cruiser, ignoring the larger threats, made it a personal mission to exterminate the annoyance that was Vermin Squadron. A perfectly aimed plasma volley ripped through the Rust Hawk's port side. The ship screamed. Alarms blared. The lights flickered and died, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the bridge.
We're hit! We're hit!"
Lex yelled, stating the catastrophically obvious. "Main power is gone. We're venting atmosphere from engineering." Gatlin's voice was a strained gasp over the comm. "I'm putting out the fires, but she's dead in the water, Captain." Valerie fought the controls, but they were sluggish, unresponsive. They were adrift, a sitting duck in the middle of the biggest furball in galactic history. Through the viewport, she saw it. The hegemony flagship, the indomitable Will. The same ship that had led the glassing of Ethelberg. It was moving towards them. A predator closing in on wounded prey. Its massive forward hangar bay doors beginning to slide open to launch fighters and finish the job. It was perfect. "This is it," Valerie said, her voice eerily calm.
"It's been an honor, Captain,"
Jeannie whispered, her work at her console finally done.
"Don't get sentimental on me now, kid,"
Valerie grunted. She looked at Lex. His face was pale with fear, but he nodded, his hand hovering over a large, red, crudely covered button on his console.
"Lex,"
Valerie said,
"you're on."
The hegemony commander of the indomitable Will must have felt a moment of profound satisfaction. The insignificant piece of human filth that had broadcast the call to arms, now crippled and helpless before him, a fitting, symmetrical end. He gave the order to launch fighters. As the massive doors slid fully open, revealing the cavernous hangar bay within, Lex slammed his hand down on the button. The experimental weapon pod detached from the Rusthawk's hull, the one Gatlin had called a bomb in a tin can. The torpedo was not a sleek, sophisticated weapon. It was a short-range nuclear device, dumb as a sack of hammers, now aimed at the heart of the hegemony command ship. On the side, Lex had, in a moment of inspiration, crudely painted 2 words in bright yellow paint. Knock. Knock. The torpedo fired. It was a point-blank shot, less than a kilometer. It sailed directly into the open maw of the flagship's hangar bay, bypassing its powerful shields entirely. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the indomitable Will began to glow from within. A silent, beautiful star of destruction bloomed in the heart of the hegemony ship. It expanded outwards, tearing the ship apart, peeling its obsidian black hull back like the petals of a deadly flower. The flagship did not explode in a cloud of fire and shrapnel. It simply vaporized, its massive form dissolving into a silent, expanding sphere of white light. A collective, triumphant roar erupted across the human comm channels. The hegemony battle line, its command ship gone, faltered for the first time. They had broken the line. On the bridge of the drifting Rusthawk, Gatlin's voice came over the comm, shaky but alive. "Auxiliary powers online. Barely." Valerie allowed herself a small, grim smile.
"See, Gatlin? Robust design."
The victory at Krill was absolute, but the cost was staggering. When the last hegemony ship had either been destroyed or had fled, a profound quiet fell over the battlefield. The once chaotic human fleet drifted through a graveyard of its own making. Shattered hulls, twisted metal, and the cold, silent bodies of the dead littered the system. The Rusthawk, running on emergency power and held together by Gatlin's creative swearing, picked its way through the debris field. The gallows humor and manic energy of the battle were gone, replaced by a heavy exhaustion. Then, a distress call cut through the silence. It was a priority signal, broadcast on an open channel.
Is the Spiral Conglomerate Destroyer profit margin? We are crippled. Life support failing. Requesting immediate assistance. Survivors aboard."
Valerie recognized the ship's signature. It belonged to a corporate captain she and Lex had been trading colorful, inventive insults with just hours before the battle. "They're half a sector away," Lex said quietly. "And we're barely holding it together as it is."
"Lot of course, Jeannie,"
Valerie said without hesitation.
"But Captain,"
Lex started.
"they're Corsac. They'd space us for a bad investment."
"Today, they're human," Valerie said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Get us there." They found the profit margin listing badly, a massive gash torn in its side. They spent the next 2 hours performing a rescue operation, pulling wounded and shell-shocked survivors from the wreckage. Valerie watched them come aboard her grimy, cramped ship. They were corporate security, Navy ratings, even a few pirates from a nearby wreck who didn't seem to care who was rescuing them. Their faces were smeared with soot and blood, their eyes wide with the things they had seen. The bravado was gone. The chaotic joy of the fight had been replaced by the grim reality of its price. Lex, for once, was silent, helping a wounded corporate officer into a medical cot. His usual fast-talking charm was gone, replaced by a quiet, focused intensity. Jeannie moved among the survivors, handing out water and medical supplies, her face a mask of determined empathy. Even Gatlin didn't complain as he jury-rigged the life support to handle the extra load. Valerie stood on her bridge, looking at the feed from the cargo bay. She saw the faces of the people they were fighting for, and the people they were fighting with. There were no pirates, or Navy, or corporates anymore. There were only survivors. The war wasn't a grand adventure. It wasn't a joke. It was a brutal, bloody necessity. The memory of the lullaby from Ethelberg had given them their rage. The faces of these survivors, she knew, would give them the cold, hard resolve they needed to see it through to the end. The news of the defeat at Krill and the destruction of the indomitable will reached the hegemony throne world of Kor. The Grand Imperator, a being of ancient lineage and unshakable arrogance, did not take it well. He stood before his war council, his face a mask of cold fury. The loss of a fleet was an annoyance. The loss of his flagship was an insult. The loss of a battle to a disorganized rabble of primitives was an unprecedented dishonor that stained his entire dynasty. "They fight without discipline," one of his generals reported, his voice trembling slightly. "They use their own ships as weapons. They throw asteroids. It is chaos, barbarism." "Barbarism must be met with overwhelming fire," the Imperator declared, his voice echoing in the vast throne room. "Their tactics are a symptom of their weakness, their emotional, disordered nature. They have insulted the Dominion. They have disgraced the memory of my ancestors." He raised a hand, silencing all further discussion. "We will no longer engage their fleets on their terms. We will bypass their pathetic swarm. We will strike at the heart of their infestation." His eyes burned with a terrible light. "Send the Grand Armada to their system of origin, the one they call Sol. We will burn their homeworld from their sky. We will erase their history, their culture, their memory. They will learn that the price for striking an empire is their own extinction." Back in the relative safety of the regrouping human fleet, Admiral Madsen received the intelligence. Hegemony communications, once thought unbreakable, had been cracked by a collaborative effort between 1,000 different human hackers, all working towards a common goal. The Imperator's decree was known. Madsen stood on the bridge of the Courageous, his face grim. He activated the fleet-wide broadcast. His voice, calm and steady, reached every ship, from the mightiest dreadnought to the battered Rust Hawk. "We have confirmation," he began without preamble. "The Hegemony Grand Armada is en route to Sol. They intend to destroy Earth." A wave of anger and fear rippled through the fleet's comm channels. "They threaten our home?" Madsen continued, his voice hardening, turning to steel. "Good. That means they're scared. They think we will fall back. They think we will rush to defend. They are wrong." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. "We will not defend. We will attack." The stunned silence fell across the fleet. From this moment on, the war is no longer about retribution from Ethelberg. It is about survival. And our survival is guaranteed not by building walls, but by tearing theirs down. Every hegemony colony, every outpost, every shipyard, every ship bearing their mark is now a primary target. We will not engage their grand armada. We will make it so they have no home to return to. Madsen's eyes seemed to burn through the screen. They want us to show what it feels like to lose a homeworld. We will show them what it feels like to have nowhere left to hide. We will not stop until they understand. The message was clear. Humanity was not fighting a defensive war. They were on a mission of total retaliatory annihilation.
You want us to do what?
Valerie asked, staring at Admiral Madsen's holographic image on her bridge. It's a Black Ops mission, Commander, Madsen said, his expression unreadable. Naval intelligence has been chasing rumors of a hegemony doomsday project for years, codenamed Sunkiller. We have reason to believe the prototype is housed at their primary R&D station, a moon-sized megastructure in the Typhoon system called the Forge. The main fleet will launch a massive three-pronged attack on their core worlds to draw attention. That will be your window. I need you to get in, get the prototype, and get out.
You want a garbage scout to infiltrate the most heavily guarded research facility in the Hegemony Dominion?
Lex asked incredulously.
Admiral, our stealth capabilities consist of Gatlin occasionally remembering to turn off the exterior lights.
Your ship's energy signature is a chaotic mess, Madsen countered. It's a junker's advantage. To their sophisticated sensors, you look like background radiation, not a military vessel. You can get closer than any of my ships. He looked at Valerie. I know this is a suicide mission, but if this Sunkiller is what we think it is, we can't afford to leave it in their hands. Valerie was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. We'll do it. Getting into the Forge was the easy part. Jeannie, with a manic grin Valerie had never seen before, sliced through the station's outer security layers like they were wet paper.
Their firewalls are so elegant,
she chirped.
So symmetrical, it's beautiful. And so easy to break.
She found a service entry port used by automated waste disposal drones and guided Valerie through it. While the station's security was in disarray thanks to Lex's increasingly unhinged broadcasts over their internal comms, Valerie and Gatlin made their way to the high-security research vault. The massive door hissed open under Gatlin's expert, if brutish, touch. Inside, suspended in an anti-gravity field, was the prototype. It was a sleek, silver torpedo-like device, about 10 meters long, covered in complex arrays and humming with a deep, unsettling power. Okay, Gatlin grumbled, prying open a control panel on the cradle. Let's see about getting this thing loose. After a moment of sizzling sparks, the field died, and the massive device settled with a soft hum. Good. The internal low-power repulsor lift is still active. It'll be like pushing a stubborn shopping cart.
Jeannie, what are we looking at?
Valerie asked into her comm as they began to maneuver the huge torpedo out of the vault.
I'm downloading the schematics now.
Jeannie's voice came back, strained.
It's not a bomb. Not exactly. It's a stellar ignition catalyst. It's designed to interface with the star's magnetic field and trigger a cascading failure.
Meaning?
It doesn't make a star go nova,
Jeannie clarified, her voice a mix of horror and awe.
It forces a targeted eruption, a superflare, a coronal mass ejection of unprecedented scale. The EMP and radiation wave would be catastrophic for any fleet in the system. But a planet with a healthy magnetosphere? It should be shielded from the worst of the particle storm. Its purpose is to destroy fleets, leaving worlds largely unharmed.
They stared at the device, a weapon of insane yet strangely targeted power.
Okay,
Valerie said, her voice grim.
Let's get this thing home.
Getting it out was considerably harder than getting in. As they wrestled the Sunkiller back to the Rust Hawk, a full-blown base-wide security lockdown was initiated. Red lights flashed, alarms blared. "They found us," Lex yelled over the comm. "My poetry readings can only distract them for so long." They made it back to the ship with plasma bolts searing the air around them. "Go, go, go!" Valerie yelled, jumping into the pilot's seat as the cargo bay door hissed shut behind Gatlin. She slammed the engines to life, pulling the Rust Hawk out of the docking bay and into the massive, city-sized central hangar of the Forge. Their escape route was blocked. A squadron of elite hegemony guard ships moved to intercept them. "Captain," Jeannie said, her voice tense, "they're prepping a wide-spectrum electronic warfare pulse. They're trying to fry our systems." A visible wave of energy washed over them. The lights on the bridge flickered violently. The consoles of their newer Navy hardware sparked and died. But the Rust Hawk's core systems stayed online. Over the comm, Gatlin just laughed. "Ha! Nice try, you polished cowards!" he yelled, slamming a series of heavy, grease-stained manual levers. "You think your fancy computer viruses can stop 2 tons of hardened steel and a stubborn old man?" The Rust Hawk's ancient analog-based overrides were completely immune. "They're still on our tail," Valerie grunted, banking hard around a fueling station. "I've got an idea," Gatlin shouted. "It's a bad one." "All your ideas are bad ones, Gatlin. Just do it." "Rerouting the primary plasma conduit to the aft refuse chute. On my mark, vent everything." "Vent what?" Lex asked. "Everything!" Valerie saw the logic in his madness. She pulled the ship up, presenting their stern to the pursuing fighters. "Now, Gatlin!" A massive, uncontrolled blast of raw plasma, superheated garbage, and pure mechanical spite erupted from the back of the Rust Hawk. The pursuing guard ships flew straight into the expanding cloud. Their shields overloaded, their engines choked on molten refuse, and 2 of them collided in a brilliant fireball. The backlash sent the Rust Hawk tumbling, but they were clear. Valerie wrestled the ship back under control, pointed its nose at the hangar's force field, and jumped, leaving the Forge erupting in chaos behind them. The final battle for core was a meat grinder. The human fleet threw itself at the homeworld's defenses and was being torn to pieces. The priority message came through from Admiral Madsen. "Cash, it's now or never." "Acknowledged," Valerie said. She took a deep breath. "Jeannie, lay in the course. Lex, warm up your microphone." The Rust Hawk broke from the main battle line, angling towards the system's smaller secondary sun. The hegemony fleet, realizing their intent, sent everything to intercept them. As Valerie flew like a woman possessed, Jeannie's voice came over the fleet-wide channel clear and precise. "To all human forces, the target is the secondary star Core Beta. We are deploying the catalyst to trigger a superflare. The resulting EMP and radiation wave will cripple the enemy fleet's electronics. The planet's magnetosphere will protect it from the worst. We are punishing their military, not exterminating their people. We are punishing them, not becoming them." It was a crucial distinction, a line drawn in the sand. As they closed the distance, the first hegemony interceptors catching up, Lex opened his channel. He broadcast on every hegemony frequency, his voice a smooth, terrible eulogy. "Good evening, Hegemony Dominion. This is Lex Calhoun of the human garbage scow Rust Hawk, and I'll be your master of ceremonies for the end of the world. You know, we found one of your toys, a sun killer. Real cute, but you built it with a flaw. You never thought anyone would actually be crazy enough to pull the trigger." Energy bolts stitched across the Rust Hawk's hull. "Spoiler alert," Lex continued, his voice rising to a manic crescendo. "We are. You wanted to teach the primitives a lesson about power? Well, lesson 1 is this. Don't hand a monkey a lit stick of dynamite and act surprised when he shoves it up your noble ass. You wanted a proportional response. How's this for proportion?" "We're in range,"
Genie yelled. "Deploying now!" "This broadcast is dedicated to the 20 million souls of Ethelberg," Lex finished, his voice a chilling whisper. "Knock, knock." Valerie fired the Sunkiller. The torpedo sped towards the orange dwarf star. It impacted the surface. The star seemed to inhale, turning a bright, terrifying blue. Then it erupted. A colossal tendril of stellar fire, a tsunami of angry light, lashed out across the system. The shock wave of pure energy slammed into the Hegemony fleet. Shields failed, systems fried. A third of their fleet was simply obliterated. The rest went dark and dead, sent into chaos by an act of tactical insanity they could not comprehend. The battle was over. The human fleet, battered and bleeding, pushed through the remnants of the Hegemony defense. The enemy ships weren't just crippled, they were psychologically broken. Then, a desperate, system-wide broadcast came from the surface of Core. It was the voice of the Grand Imperator, stripped of all arrogance. It was the voice of a man who had stared into the abyss and seen a grinning human face staring back. He spoke one word, repeated over and over again, in every known language. Surrender. We surrender. We surrender. Humanity had won. The Hegemony Dominion had not surrendered to a superior force. They had surrendered to a species whose capacity for sheer, unadulterated madness had shattered their understanding of the universe. They were not beaten. They were terrified of what humans might do next. The Rest Hawk drifted through the wreckage. The view screen showed the dying, flickering light of the wounded sun. The comms, once a roar of battle, were now filled with the quiet, somber sounds of victory. Roll calls for the dead, damage reports, and stunned silence. Valerie Cash stood on her bridge and looked out at the ghost of a fleet surrounding her. She pulled a tarnished silver flask from her jacket and took a long, slow pull. Lex was slumped in his chair, uncharacteristically quiet. Jeannie was crying silently at her console. Over the comm, she could hear Gatlin, not swearing, just staring at his damage readouts, the clicks of his tools a soft, mournful rhythm. They were alive. They had won. It didn't feel like it. Valerie keyed the ship-wide comm. Her voice was quiet. "We're alive. That's a win. Now get this piece of junk pointed home. I'm buying the first round." The words were not rousing, but they were the anchor they needed. It was a promise of tomorrow. The great human armada, a shadow of its former self, but unbroken in spirit, began to disperse. The Terran Navy warships turned back toward home. The corporate fleets set courses for their own territories. The pirate fleets vanished back into the lawless regions of space. They had come together for a single bloody purpose, and now it was done. As the Rust Hawk prepared to make its own jump into the quiet anonymity of deep space, a final galactic news feed played out on Lex's console. The Hegemony Dominion was in shambles. The surrender was unconditional. Treaties were being redrawn. A new phrase had entered the galactic lexicon, whispered in boardrooms and back alley bars alike. Don't piss off humanity. Valerie looked at her crew, at Jeannie, already running diagnostics, at Lex, managing a weak smile. She heard Gatlin over the comm, finally starting to complain about the port thruster. Her family. Her broken, beautiful family. A small, grim smile touched her lips. "They wanted to scare us," she muttered. "Now they're scared of us." Good. The Rust Hawk, trailing smoke and held together by spite, turned its nose towards the endless dark. Then it vanished into the silent sea of hyperspace. They were not heroes. They were not soldiers.
They were simply human.